Welcome to the Momnificent Podcast. This is the place where we help parents live a happy, healthy life with their kids. We're going to show you how to connect with your child and help them even in their most difficult moments as we hear from experts in the field. I'm your host, Dr. Karin Jakubowski, an international speaker, public school principal, and former struggling student. The Momnificent Podcast equips parents with science-based strategies to help you live a happy, healthy life with your kids. Welcome. I am really grateful to have back on our show today Richard Capriola, because I've had many parents over the last few months ask me so many questions about social media, its impact on kids, how much should they be on it, what is it doing to them, what are the repercussions of it. And so I love that Rick is here with me today to really share more about that and hopefully give you listening some answers to how to manage social media for your kids and more about it that might be something you know or you don't know about what's taking place on those social media platforms. So just as a brief reminder for those of you who are new listening, Richard Capriola is a mental health and addictions counselor and has been for over 2 decades. In 2020, he published The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse, and a workbook. Rick, welcome back to Momnificent.
Thank you, Karin. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this issue of social media in teens, and perhaps share some information and some tips that parents will find helpful and useful.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. So parents, I hear, often struggle with the question, what is age appropriate for my child on social media? And I think you had mentioned that you know a few things that you want to share what the cyber experts are even saying and recommending to parents.
Yeah, when we survey cyber experts, so-called cyber experts, and we ask them, what age is it appropriate for adolescents, teenagers to be engaged with social media apps? And it seems that the prevailing opinion is that for most apps like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, things like that, it usually is around age 13. That seems to be the consensus, where age 13 is the earliest age that they would recommend a child be introduced to some of those apps. Now, it's interesting because when it came to Snapchat, the opinion changed. The cyber experts recommended that the minimum age for Snapchat be 16. And I think that's because they saw it as being maybe a little bit more risky. But overall, age 13 seems to be the consensus as the earliest age for a teenager to start getting on social apps. Now, they did mention that every parent sort of has to assess what age they feel is appropriate, because every child is different. Some seem to be a little bit more mature, some seem to be able to be ready, but as a general rule, I would look at age 13 as perhaps being the first opportunity to introduce the child to apps like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Yeah, so maybe trying to hold off as long as they can, because I'm sure the peer pressure of your child's friends can influence it. Because if they're on those social media platforms, then your child wants to be. And then I'm sure it's like a holding off as long as you can. Because when you said 13, I was like, oh, wow, I would think it would try to be an older age where they have that more maturity to handle some of those. But if you have that peer pressure, like kids that's hard when your kid's constantly asking you, like, come on, please, can I, my friend's doing it, can I do, and then it just seems so common that you kind of put aside what, in a quiet moment, if you really would have asked yourself what age you would do it, probably wouldn't be 13.
Yeah, so I think what you want to do is, and you're absolutely right, the child may be responding to peer pressure. Their friends are using apps. They're encouraged to join their friends, so it becomes more difficult for the parent to maybe say no. So as you introduce your child to apps, I think what you want to do is, first of all, understand for yourself what the app is used for. Do you know what the app is? Do you know what it's used for that your child wants to get introduced to and begin using? Ask your child and find out, how do you plan to use it? What are you going to use it for? And what sort of things do you want to post? These are questions and answers that you should get from your child. Do you know what it's for? How do you plan to use it? And what sort of things will you be posting on there? What will you be doing on the app? So there's just some basic questions that parents should inquire before saying, okay, it's okay for you to use this app.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I appreciate you saying that. And so, how extensively are teens using social media? Which is probably going to be an alarming answer, right? Look at you, you're already laughing. and which and and which social media apps do they tend to favor?
It is alarming. Um, you know, Instagram, for example, which is owned by Facebook, 22 million teens are on Instagram. Facebook, not so much. Only about 5 million teens use Facebook. But the one that they really prefer, the one that they really latch onto is TikTok. It's the most popular. It's more popular than Instagram. 100 million users of TikTok in the United States, 689 million worldwide. The average time that a person, a teenager, is on TikTok averages 80 minutes a day. So TikTok by far is becoming the predominant app that teenagers are using. 67%, 70% of them use it on a weekly basis. But when you look at Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok overwhelmingly is the ones that they prefer. They like posting videos. They like posting songs. They like all of the things that they can post on TikTok. If you're not familiar with it as a parent, you should join up and you should look and see for yourself all of the different things that are on TikTok.
So I have to admit that I was looking through TikTok. I don't do it often, but the one time I was, it made me laugh out loud. It was like watching a reality show. The funniest things that people were doing, like to me, my observation of it is it's crazy, silly things. And I know that's not everything because a lot of people use it for marketing or, sharing what they, are doing and trying to sell. But and then you want to hear something crazy? Just this week, I saw a 5-year-old talking about being on TikTok or their parent watching TikTok. And just the fact that a 5-year-old mentioned it, I was like, what? Oh my gosh, how do these kids, and at such a young age, I'm like, that's not right. Um, so what are, and then you call it the TikTok ticks. Okay, that's the first I've heard of that. Tell us about that.
Um, yeah, let me mention one other thing about these apps, because there are some that parents should be aware of that their children should be avoiding. They should not be using. One is called IMVU, and that is a role-playing type of act, oftentimes involving sexual issues or bullying issues. So IMVU is one that they should avoid. Another one is ChatSpin. ChatSpin is a webcam app. Another one is Kik, which seems to involve, it's a messaging app. And then there's Tumblr, which is a blogging site that sort of leans towards things like depression and anxiety and drug use and self-harm. So those are a few that I would recommend that parents make sure their kids are not using. The TikTok Tourette's is an interesting issue that has come up during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, roughly 1 to 5%. We were seeing 1 to 5% of kids showing this TikTok Tourette's from being on TikTok. That's where it gets its name. But now it tends to run 20 to 35%. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. It involves behaviors that include explosive type verbal utterings, involuntary muscle contractions, and twitching, symptoms that are associated with Tourette's. But this is not really Tourette's. It's more of symptoms that are mimicking Tourette's, and seems to come from perhaps being exposed and using TikTok and everything that can be involved with seeing TikTok.
But how does that happen? Did they say?
No, they really didn't say. They think a lot of it is related to the pandemic. A lot of it is related to kids spending enormous amounts of time on TikTok. And then perhaps some of these symptoms might have already been there, and perhaps the exposure to social media increased it. I don't think they're really
Hmm.
aware of all of the factors that came into play.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do they recommend if you are kind of making that correlation and you see that in your child, or I mean,
I would follow up and get an assessment done to see what the real problem is. Tourette's. This may not be actual diagnosed as Tourette's. Tourette's is generally, I think, found in adolescence and pre-adolescent ages, but it also might be exposure to excessive exposure to social media. So, if you're concerned as a parent, the best thing to do is to get some professional assessments and some advice.
and when everything closed down, right, when the pandemic started, it's amazing how much more time people had in accessing the social media because that was people weren't going anywhere. We weren't going out. We were home. And it's amazing the time on our hands that was that perfect opportunity for just the views to grow on those platforms.
hmm Yes, kids
And
were
that was
isolated.
yeah, that was the only way they were communicating in some form that they weren't getting within the school environment. And we know Zoom is not the same as, connecting, even though people were trying to use it in a way to keep connected. And then you create that habit, and it's hard to pull off that habit. I mean, that's a whole other, uh, issue. Because then, if you're not addicted, you could say addicted. People might not admit addicted to TikTok, right? For example, but if you are so used to it that it's a habit for you, we all know how hard it takes to break a habit. And now, if there's these ticks involved on something that you are used to and enjoy and like doing, that's got to be extremely difficult to pull off of to just take care of yourself and help yourself.
Yes, it truly does become compulsive. It becomes a compulsive behavior, and and kids are like adults. They lose track of time. They get involved in these social apps, and pretty soon, time escapes, and they're spending extreme amounts of time on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It really does become compulsive and consuming.
Yeah. And I mean, along with just online social media, that the platforms, it's amazing to me how many kids I'll ask, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the most common thing I hear is to be a YouTuber and to create video games. Like that is like the number two things I hear over and over. It used to be like a veterinarian or something like that. Usually that was my girls in fifth grade or fourth grade. Um, but yeah, just the whole appeal of it too, is just it's all virtual. It's all online, and it's like their new normal, right?
It's
Because that
it's it
wasn't
is.
ours.
It is. And it's interesting because the research that was done by Facebook showed that teenagers know, they understand that these apps are addictive, and they have a desire to spend less time on the apps. But they also say that, and they admit that they don't have enough self-control to change their scrolling behavior. So they know that these apps that they're on are consuming an awful amount, a lot of their time. They wish they could cut back on it, but they admit, I don't have the self-control to be able to do it. I just can't pull away from it. And that's one of the interesting things that I think we learned about teenagers in their use of these apps.
Hmm. As well as I'll say video games, because you can't get a kids get addicted to the video games, and then what aren't they doing? Their homework, resting, being ready for school, having their work done, because it's this then it's in them. They're like, I have to play. I want to play. It's all I want to do. Yeah.
The Facebook research that was disclosed also showed a number of interesting aspects to kids using social media. 60% of girls and 40% of boys experience negative social comparison. 60% of girls and 40% of boys, negative social comparison, comparing themselves to others.
Yeah.
37% of girls feel pressured to look perfect in their posts. They feel pressured to look perfect. About a third of girls say that the content that they see makes them feel worse about themselves. So what they're seeing, a third of the girls say it makes them feel worse about themselves. 50%, half of the users report feeling unattractive and said the feelings began on Instagram. They feel unattractive. And 14% of boys said Instagram made them feel worse about themselves. So for teenagers who are already struggling with some type of mental health issue, social media may make those feelings worse. And I think that this is particularly important for girls who get their self-image. Boys do too, but girls, I think, really respond to what's going on with social media, and they compare themselves to what other girls look like in social media. And they may not always understand that the images that they're seeing on social media are not necessarily accurate. People make themselves up to be very beautiful or very handsome, and then girls and boys compare themselves to that. And then they get feedback. So when they post something, maybe they put a picture of themselves, maybe they put something on, and they get feedback, and it's negative feedback that can be very, very damaging to their self-image and to how they feel about themselves. And I think a lot of what is going on is so many teenagers are building their self-esteem and building their self-image around what they see on social media and the type of reactions that they're getting on social media.
I agree. And I had interviewed two seniors, high school seniors, about a year ago, and they shared with me that when they wake up in the morning, that is the first thing they look at is their social media feed. Like it's like this like trigger. It's a habit. It's a go-to. It's like it's not even a second thought anymore. Who said what? Who posted what? What where am I in all of this? And yeah, go ahead.
And how many parents do the same thing? How many parents, the first thing they do in the morning when they wake up is reach for their phone? Maybe they're checking their email. Maybe they're checking an app. Maybe they're, checking to see if they got any messages. So, parents are modeling the same behavior in a way because the first thing they do in the morning is reach for their phone.
Yeah. So, what are some risks associated with social media, mental health, and otherwise?
I think the risk is number one, compulsive behavior. Being tied to social media at the sacrifice of developing other healthy activities, person-to-person communication, extracurricular activities for kids, making sure that your schoolwork is done, that you're doing your homework, you're doing your assignments, that you're not sacrificing family time because you're spending all your time on the phone. So this has the ability and the power to pull kids away from their families, from their friends, at least personal interaction with friends, and become compulsive and time consuming.
And you can get a group of teenagers in a room, Rick, and they're not even talking, but they're texting each other in the room.
Yes, isn't that crazy?
Oh, I was like, what is this?
Yeah, rather than talk,
Oh
they
my gosh,
text.
they're right there. Why are you even together?
Yeah.
But we know the benefits of being in person, interactive, reading social cues, reading emotions, and then they have this draw that draws them into the social media world, where then all of a sudden, once you do go back to reality, face to face, in person, life has its boring moments, and they can't handle them because they're so emotionally, fed on such a charge on the social media site that actually in person, like they can't even handle it because it's so dull and because it can be boring and because moments in life are just part of that. And we all know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think then they don't even know how to act. And then there creates even more of that, negative thoughts or depression because gosh, then you open your eyes to the world around you physically and you're like, I don't like this because the social media world looks so much better. But then if you are negatively impacted on social media, like you just explained those statistics, it's like you're actually getting hit in both dimensions, realities in a sense. Anyway, wow. So what things should we as parents be doing to keep our kids safe on social media? I know there's things like Bark and other platforms that help a parent kind of watch and monitor. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, Mayo Clinic had some, I think, good insights and recommendations for parents. And one of them was to set reasonable limits. Talk about how to avoid social media interfering with activities like sleep and meals and homework. Encourage your child to have a regular bedtime sleep routine and keep cell phones and tablets out of teens' bedrooms. How many times do you find a parent who on a social media site complains that their child is up until 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they go into their bedroom and they find that they're on social media? So I think you want to, as a parent, set reasonable limits. Make sure that these are social media activities are not interfering with their extracurricular activities, with their sleep, with their meals, with their homework, with their academic performance. Um, a second recommendation was monitor your teen's accounts. Let your teen know that you will regularly be checking on their accounts and make sure that you follow through. So many parents sort of just let their teens go into social media and they don't follow up. They don't check to see what apps are they using, how often are they on the phone, how long are they on the phone, and things like that. So monitor your teens' accounts. Third, explain what's not okay. Have a discussion with your child. Discourage gossiping. Discourage any spreading of rumors. Discourage any type of bullying or damaging someone's reputation. Talk to your child about what's appropriate and safe on social media. Third, another one is encourage your child to have face-to-face contact with their friends. Especially teens that are vulnerable to social anxiety, because they will be the ones who tend to really prefer to use social media because they have social anxiety. But encourage your child to engage with their friends, other than social media. Have face-to-face contact with your friends. And then talk about social media. Talk about their habits. Ask how your teen is using social media and how it makes them feel. Remind them that social media can often be filled with unrealistic images, and let them know that what they may be hearing, what they may be seeing on social media may not be an accurate picture of reality. And then finally, use parental controls. Many phone internet providers allow you to set parental controls, and you can do that. You can control the time that your child is on social media. You can shut down their internet access after, say, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, whatever you feel is appropriate. But talk to your providers about what type of parental controls are available to you, and then use the parental controls that you feel are appropriate based upon your child's age, based upon what you know they're doing, and their behavior. So those are some of the tips that came from Mayo Clinic.
Hey there, it's Karin. I hope that you're enjoying the show. And by the way, if you're a mom who wants to learn how to help your child when they're struggling behaviorally or facing challenges in school, get started today by getting my free short video course, 3 Steps to Happy Healthy Kids, at www.educationalimpactacademy.com/free video. If you're new here or you haven't done this yet, this is definitely the first step to get started in learning how to have a happy, healthy life with your kids. So head on over to www.educationalimpactacademy.com/free video and grab your free gift today. That's really, really good. And I like how you said, like, make a pact with your family that you're not going to use tech when you're eating dinner, for example. When we are eating together, like the tech is not there. And it's alarming to me when I go out to a restaurant and I see a family of four sitting there all on their phones. And I'm like, you're out to dinner. Like, talk to each other, put that away. Like, it's amazing how common it's become, and when you're not like around it as much and then you see it, it's like, seriously?
Yeah. And and
Wow.
and kids take their cues from their parents. So
Yeah.
the other thing I would say to parents is monitor your own time on social media. If kids see you on social media and you're on there a lot or all the time, they're going to think that's okay. So if you're at the dinner table and you're texting and watching apps, kids wonder, well, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
If you're spending your entire evening or a large part of your evening tied to your cell phone, doing apps, doing whatever you're doing, kids see that and they begin to see that that's pretty acceptable behavior. And it's hard for a parent to say, well, it's okay for me to be on my app all evening, but you can't be.
Right.
So be mindful of how much time you as a parent are spending on these social apps or even on your phone doing texting or whatever you're doing, because kids pay attention. They see the amount of time that you're on your phone too, and they take their cues from that.
They really do. We are our number one role model for our kids. And even if you say don't, but you're the one doing, they're going to follow what you do despite what you say that may be the opposite. So it is so important to just be self-reflective and check in with ourselves to see where and how often and how much, and think of it through that lens of, my child is seeing this and this is what's telling them is okay, is right, is, allowed, is a, yeah. So that's a really, really good point that you brought out. Oh, thank you so much, Rick. So what about having a fake account just to like spy on your child or see what they're doing? What's your thought on that?
I think you want to be honest with your child. I think you want to be upfront with them. I don't think you want to go behind their backs to see what they're doing. I do think you want to make it very clear to them that you are going to be checking on their accounts, that you are going to be monitoring the time that they're spending on social apps, that you're going to pay attention to what apps they're using, and that from time to time you may be having a discussion. You may be checking in with them about how social media is working for them. How's it affecting them? What are they doing? Um, you want to build up trust with your child so that they feel comfortable talking to you about what they're doing. Now, they're not going to tell you everything they're doing on a social app, and you're probably not going to want to know everything that they're doing. You want to make sure that the time that they're spending is appropriate, that the sites that they're on are appropriate, and you want to know how it's affecting them. You want to know if there's something going on in an app that might be upsetting them. You want to be able to hopefully set the groundwork so that they feel comfortable talking to you about the things that they observe on social media or the things that might be bothering them. But as a parent, I think your role is to monitor, to check in, to set appropriate controls and rules, and then follow through with them.
I like that. I think that that feels right, to just to be open and honest with them. Like, hey, I'm going to be watching, I'm going to be tracking, I'm going to be checking in. I want you to be safe. We don't want to be surprised if something were to happen and something were to be said, or you to see something and then, have such a difficult time with it and us not be there to even support you.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way
And
to approach it.
I like that. I really like that a lot. And I always tell teachers that it's so easy to write something in an email. It's easy for people just to type something. But then if you actually pick up the phone or you talk to them, they are less likely to tell you what they actually took so easily to write, to type. It's a very, unique thing there, because sometimes people can write things and it can feel like they're yelling at you. And then when you confront them about them, they're like, oh, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah.
But how often is that so easily misconstrued? And yet, if you think of all of the texting and the chats and the things that kids say. Because once sometimes we've had like fourth or fifth graders see something on Snapchat that someone said about someone, and then their feelings were hurt, and now you're dealing with it at school. And when you go back to being like, when you wrote that here, and I have the student tell the other student, how did that make you feel? And then they're like, oh, because it's so much easier to say it. But then when you put it out in the open and you're talking to each other face to face and putting in there what that made them feel and what that made them think, it it really is eye opening, because they then realize how hurtful it was what they said, that in that instant it was just a thought, and you just type it and send, and it's gone, and you move right on.
Yeah, that's a great point because, in texting, that's a form of communication where you miss so much of the interpersonal communication. You miss the communication features that we see when we're actually talking to somebody. We miss the tone of their voice. We miss their facial expression. We miss that part of the communication process that gives us information, is how they're receiving the message and how they're reacting to it. You don't know that when you send a text message,
No,
and
or an
it may
email.
be interpreted completely different in what you intended it to be, but you don't know that because you don't have the opportunity to assess their physical reaction to what you've said.
Yeah, yeah, because there's so many times when I receive an email from a parent, and it's like, whew, a little bit emotionally charged, or that's how I'm reading it and taking it, right? And then when I pick up the phone and I talk to them, 9 times out of 10, it is not as bad as how I was receiving it.
Yeah, there you go. That's
It
a great
is
example.
so powerful. And I'm constantly, anyway, I know I'm like digressing just for a second here, but it's yeah. And it's, what's crazy, Rick? I had a parent email me once, and I picked up the phone and called them, and you know what they said? I can't believe you called me. And I was like, what, nobody calls you anymore? Or what? Why is that a surprise? And it was like, wow, yeah, people are just so used to, emailing back and forth, that to actually talk to someone on the phone is like, and then usually even when I talk to people normally, and I will call them back to talk about anything that they've, sent me an email about, they're so grateful. And you'll even hear it like trickle down through other people, like, wow, the principal called me and actually talked to me through that X, Y, and Z. Like, I think we forget. And I just want to encourage, you listening, like, pick up the phone and call. If something came across like not so great, I challenge you to actually have the conversation, over the phone or in person with them, to just see like, hey, what's up with that? And wow, it's amazing how I think you can like figure things out, and they might not be as upsetting or stressful or intense or emotionally charged.
Exactly. You might interpret the message completely different when it is expressed to you verbally as opposed to non-verbally, because nonverbal communication misses so many cues. Facial
So
tone,
many.
even the tone of our voice is missing when we type up that email. And what may come across as being perhaps angry is not really intended to be angry or meant to be angry, but you don't know that until you actually hear the voice of the person, and you find out that the way you interpreted that written communication was not quite right.
Well, Rick, again, thank you so much for your insights, the research, the recommendations that you've left our listeners with today. And how can someone find and follow you if they want to learn more and follow you, and look up your book even?
Thank you, Karen. I would recommend that people go to the book's website, which is helptheaddictedchild.com. Helptheaddictedchild.com. There's a link where they can send me a message or send me a comment. It'll come directly to my email. And if they would like to learn more about adolescent substance abuse, feel better prepared, more empowered, there's a link that will take them to the Amazon, where they can order a copy of my book, Help the Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse, which is available as both a Kindle and a paperback. So I would encourage every parent, every teacher, everyone who wants to learn more about adolescent substance abuse, to go to the website, helptheaddictedchild.com, and take a look at the book. Or the parent workbook, and order a copy. It won't take you long to read. It's only about 100 pages, but hopefully you'll feel more empowered and better informed on this topic.
Thank you, Rick. And for those listening, if this is the first time you're hearing Rick on this podcast, this is the third time he's come on. Like he said, if you go back a couple episodes, he did an amazing interview with me on substance abuse for teens, adolescents, and also on mental health for teens and kids. So definitely check those out if you want to learn more. And again, thank you so much, and I appreciate it. And we'll find another topic to have you back.
Okay, great. I'm always willing to come back and chat with you, because it seems we always have these great conversations that I hope everybody who listens walks away and feels as if their time spent here was valuable and informative. So thank you so much.
Well, that's all we've got for this episode of the Momnificent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be honored if you would subscribe and rate if you really liked it. I know wherever you're listening right now, it might not be the best time to leave a comment, but feel free to leave a question, a review, or a comment at any time. And until next time, remember, don't worry, be happy.